Now that DeMar DeRozan has found a home in Sacramento, the brunt of the NBA offseason has passed, and let me just say, it was pretty solid. It was no 2016 by any means, but still a lot of player movement, a lot of teams got better, a lot of interesting moves were made, and most importantly, the ineptitude of the worst organizations in the league continues to shine through. So if you enjoy this content, like and subscribe. Comment down below who you thought was the biggest winner and loser of the NBA offseason. Share the video with a friend, and welcome to the Sweatshop. As I said in the intro, the NBA offseason is pretty much over. The last bit of news we're gonna get is the general NBA media severely and irresponsibly overhyping NBA rookies and sophomores based solely off of Summer League tape. So given that all the moves have pretty much already taken place, I figured now was the best time for us to go over the winners and losers of the offseason, including drafts, not just free agency. So we're gonna start off with one of the winners, the most talked about team of the NBA offseason, the Philadelphia 76ers. The reason I have them as winners, though, is probably not for the same reason most people has them as winners. I was not a huge fan of the Paul George signing. I saw the merit of it. I thought it was a decent move, but 4 years, $211 million for an injury-prone star player in their age 34 season? I don't know. Yes, if everyone's healthy, then the fit is probably the best fit out of any big three that we currently have in the league, but I don't know. That if is a very big if. Paul George is one of the most injury-prone stars in the league, overshadowed only by the superstar on the Philadelphia 76ers, Joel Embiid. They didn't have a lot of moves they could have made, and Paul George does significantly increase the ceiling of the team. I just don't like the uncertainty of who's gonna play when. And on top of me not being sure about the Paul George signing, the Sixers lost a lot of key role players. Tobias Harris, I mean, yes, he was ass in the playoffs, but he was 17 points per game in the regular season. That's valuable somewhat. Buddy Hield, he never really fit in, so that's not a huge loss. But Nicholas Batum and DeAnthony Melton, those were two really solid role players. So if the Sixers offseason was literally just, oh, we signed Paul George, but we lost these guys, I would probably put them in the neutral category. But the fact that they were pretty much able to offset all their losses with new role player signings like Caleb Martin, Eric Gordon, Andre Drummond, and the Zest god, Jared McCain, like, I don't think these guys will be as good as the guys they lost, but I think they can make up 80% of the production, and that combined with the potential of Paul George and Joel Embiid, and then Tyrese Maxey, who's not really injury prone, but just the potential of those three playing together in the playoffs, I'd call this offseason a win for the 76ers. First team in our neutral category, the Sacramento Kings. They had some cursory acquisitions and losses. Jalen McDaniels as an acquisition, whatever. Devin Carter, I think that's a really solid all-around guard prospect. He was one of my favorite prospects in this draft, so that should be a good pickup. Davion Mitchell, someone who they lost, one of the best guard defenders in the league, but he didn't give you a lot offensively. He wasn't bad, but he wasn't like a plus by any means. They also lost Chris Duarte, shooting prospect who had one good year in Indy and since then has been uber inefficient. And then also Harrison Barnes, one of the best vet role players in the league. That's going to be a significant loss in the locker room. And then also, I'm not sure if DeMar DeRozan will end up being an upgrade. Talent-wise, he's a huge upgrade, but I don't know. I'm just not a fan of the fit. DeMar DeRozan needs the ball in his hands to be at his best. Ideally, you'd want him in the starting lineup, and then you'd stagger the minutes so that he'd be the primary playmaker for the second unit. But I mean, the Kings already have De'Aaron Fox and Malik Monk, who they just paid. So I don't know. We'll see. It definitely could work out. I'm not seeing the fit fully right now. And they didn't give up anything crazy for him, asset-wise and contract-wise. So I'm willing to call this a neutral for now. Biggest loser. Like, is this any surprise? It's been the biggest loser for pretty much the last half century running, the Los Angeles Clippers. Goodness gracious. Let's get the acquisitions out of the way just to get like some positives on the books. Nicholas Batum and Derrick Jones Jr., two really solid role players. Chris Dunn and Mo Bamba, mid-ass role players. They'll give you 5-10 minutes in their regular season, but nothing much more than that. And then for their losses, Mason Plumlee, decent role player, big man, and someone else. Oh, Paul George, the guy that they sold their entire future for. And I mean, I thank them for that as a Thunder fan, but goodness gracious, like, what are you guys doing? I do understand not paying Paul George in principle. As I said before already in the 76ers portion of the video, injury-prone star player, doesn't always come up big in the playoffs, and he's gonna be 38, 39 by the time the contract would have expired. So I understand in principle why you wouldn't pay Paul George. But instead of paying Paul George, you paid Kawhi Leonard, someone who's even more injury prone than Paul George, and James Harden, someone who's even less dependable in the playoffs than Paul George. And on top of all that, Paul George should have much more staying power with the Clippers than Kawhi does. I mean, the one time the Clippers reached the Western Conference Finals in the history of the franchise, it wasn't with Kawhi at the helm. Kawhi was injured. It was with Paul George carrying the team. Oh, and also, Paul George, again, is the one you gave up your entire future for, and you're gonna give up on him? Before we get into the next winner, please like and subscribe. It helps the channel out a ton, and we know you'll like it over here at the Sweatshop, so just come and join us. Next winner, the OKC Thunder. Yes! Yes! Acquisitions, Alex Caruso? And we only traded Josh Giddey? Like, am I dreaming? Alex Caruso is going to slide in perfectly to that shooting guard spot in our starting lineup, and he's gonna make us the best perimeter defense team in the league outside of the Celtics and maybe the Magic. Our starting lineup has SGA, Lou Dort, and Alex Caruso on the same team, and then Jalen Williams. Goodness gracious. And then on top of that, he's a great vet and he's a good secondary ball handler. He'll be able to take some of the pressure off of Shea in the playoffs, not necessarily with his shot creation, but more with playmaking and stuff of that nature. This was just a perfect pickup. And then they went out and signed Isaiah Hartenstein. That's exactly what I wanted. I just wanted a big body on this team. I would have preferred someone that knows their way around the McDonald's menu a little better, but Isaiah Hartenstein, like, he's big enough to take some of the pressure off of Chet in the playoffs. And then on top of him just being a good big body, he's a good finisher and is also a really good passer too, so he'll fit into this system outside of just being a good big body to have on the court. So love both of those signings. Alexander Topic I thought was a really good draft. I honestly would have preferred someone who could help us right now that we're kind of getting into that championship contention window, but Alexander Topic, if that hits, that's gonna take us to another level. Next, neutral, the Golden State Warriors. The biggest conversation surrounding the Warriors is the Klay Thompson trade. I understand Klay isn't what he was, but he was still 18 points per game on insane efficiency from three. He's still one of the best shooters in the league, and I don't know, he's going to be hard to replace for the Warriors, and that's not even taking into account the impact it has to have on the roster of losing one of the pillars of not just your team in the present, but one of the pillars of your entire franchise, in the history of the franchise. It's just, there's got to be some adverse effects with that. On top of losing Klay Thompson though, they also lost Chris Paul, which is a loss, but not a huge loss. He's getting older. He was solid, but not crazy good on the Warriors, and it didn't feel like he really fit onto the team. Dario Saric, that's a pretty big loss. He's probably the best bench player on this team. I hope I'm not getting anyone, but he's a pretty big loss and it's going to be hard to replace his production. They did make some key acquisitions though that has me a little bit higher than loser for this team. DeAnthony Melton is a really good 3-and-D player. He should be able to come off the bench or play the two next to Steph. Buddy Hield may or may not be able to make up Klay's production. I'm not sure about that. Kyle Anderson looks to be the Dario Saric replacement, and I feel like he should be able to fill those shoes. He's obviously not as good offensively, but he's a lot better defensively. I saw someone called him the poor man's Draymond Green, and I think that's a very apt comparison. So the Warriors didn't really get better or worse, in my opinion, maybe a little bit worse, but overall they've shifted more from offense to defense. We'll see how that pans out. And now our loser, the Denver Nuggets. Now, when you compare the Nuggets' losses to the other losers I have on this list, it's not really anything crazy. Like, they lost KCP, who's a really good role player, but he's no Paul George like the Clippers. But it's just the fact that the Nuggets continue to lose out on their high-level role players. Last year, it was Bruce Brown. This year, it was KCP. I don't know. It just has me wondering if the Nuggets should consider trading away Michael Porter Jr. I think Michael Porter Jr. is a really solid player, but he's making $30 million a year for 16 points per game on absurd efficiency, yes, but is he worth more than two high-level role players on this team that already has Jokic and Jamal Murray? I don't know. It's something for the Nuggets to consider. All right, now we got the big ones out of the way. Let's do some quick hitters. First, the winners. I really enjoyed the Washington Wizards offseason. The New York Knicks, I would have had them in the overall winners category, the big winners, but they did lose out on Isaiah Hartenstein. And while I do like the Mikal Bridges acquisition in a vacuum, they did give up an assload of picks for someone who's a fringe all-star at the very best. And now, I have it wrote down, do they have the best first through fifth option in the league outside of Boston and maybe OKC? I don't know, it's up for debate. Another winner though, the Nets, as I said before, they got an assload of picks for Mikal Bridges. They bums now, but at least they got some more asset security. Winner, the Orlando Magic. KCP is the perfect fit for the Magic if they weren't able to get PG-13. The Spurs, I probably should have had these guys in the big winners category. It's just hard because they're not gonna be like, I don't think they're gonna be a playoff team based off these moves or anything, but we're gonna see a first team All-NBA type year from Victor Wembanyama now that he has a little bit more support. Neutral, the Mavs. I'm just not as big a fan of the Klay Thompson signing as most. The Mavs desperately needed shooting, and Klay Thompson does quench that thirst, but he's not as good defensively as he was 5, 6, 7 years ago. And the Mavs lost their two best perimeter defenders this offseason, and Josh Green and Derrick Jones Jr. Now they did get Najee Marshall, who should be a pretty good Derrick Jones Jr. replacement. I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the season we call him, or we say he ended up being better than Derrick Jones Jr. Overall, I do think they got better. I just don't know if that's going to be enough to bridge a 3-game gap between them and Boston. Another neutral team, the New Orleans Pelicans. I thought the DeJounte Murray acquisition was good. I think this should work, but people should just pump their brakes a little bit when talking about the fit. And they also lost a lot of other key role players, Jonas, Najee, Larry Nance Jr. Neutral T-Wolves, they correctly, in my opinion, traded defense for offense. Kyle Anderson, they lost, but in his place, they got Joe Ingles, someone who, if he's as good as he was last year in Orlando, should be a really solid secondary playmaker for the team. And I do like the Rob Dillingham acquisition. Again, fills the role they need. Neutral, the Bulls, they could have gotten more out of Caruso if they weren't stubborn. Giddey is still a solid pickup though. It just puts a bit of a roadblock in the guard room. They got a decent haul for DeMar. And the only team I have in the quick hitters losers, the Lakers. I really don't want to talk about them. With that, thank you for watching all the way through. We greatly appreciate it. If you enjoyed this content, why don't you go ahead and like and subscribe? Comment down below who you thought was the biggest winner and loser of the NBA offseason. Share the video with a friend, and as always, stay sweaty, ladies and gentlemen.